To our amazing viewers at Midnight Affairs Tales, welcome and thank you. Your presence makes these stories worth sharing. We'd love to hear which part of the world are you joining us from. Let us know now. Let's dive into today's story, Chapter 1. Staff Sergeant Cole Brennan adjusted his tactical vest one last time before stepping out into the dusty heat of Kandahar. This would be his final patrol. He was 28, built like a linebacker, with steel-gray eyes that had witnessed too much. After 6 years in some of the world's most dangerous war zones, the wear showed, not in his expression, which remained unreadable, but in his hands, calloused, cracked, and shaped by combat. On his ring finger, a simple gold wedding band glinted under the Afghan sun. Back in Fort Campbell, Kentucky, Cole's world was smaller, softer. His wife Amy and their 8-year-old daughter, Sophie. They were his peace in a life defined by chaos. Amy had been a nursing student with auburn hair and bright green eyes when he met her in college. She laughed too easily, lit up every room, and somehow saw past the hard edges in him. Sophie had come after 3 miscarriages, a tiny fighter with her mother's beauty and her father's grit. Cole's strength had been born in struggle. Raised in the hollers of eastern Kentucky by his mother Martha, a waitress who never asked for help and never took a day off, he'd learned early how cruel the world could be. His father had vanished when Cole was 7. Bullies mocked him for second-hand clothes and a missing dad. So Cole stopped talking and started fighting. By high school, no one crossed him. The Army had given him discipline, purpose, and later, a way out. Special Forces had taken everything raw and made it deadly. He learned to wait, to strike, to protect his own without compromise. His code was clear: protect the weak, destroy the threat. Amy had met Cole when he was briefly in college on the GI Bill, studying criminal justice. She was drawn to his strength. He was pulled in by her softness. Their love burned fast and bright. 2 years later, they were married. 3 years after that, Sophie arrived, and Cole believed, for the first time in his life, that he had everything. Amy had grown up in another world, suburban Louisville, private school, doting parents who ran a small accounting firm. Gerald and Linda Patterson had hoped their daughter would marry someone predictable, someone with clean fingernails and a steady paycheck. Cole wasn't that. But his love for Amy, his devotion to Sophie, made him tolerable to them. Barely. But over time, Amy had grown restless. Base housing didn't feel like home. Deployment after deployment wore her down. She didn't fit in with the other military wives. Sophie struggled with Cole's absences, acting out each time he left. And Amy? She felt abandoned, then angry for feeling abandoned. 6 months ago, Troy Hendris appeared. He was everything Cole wasn't. Charming, clean-cut, smooth. A civilian contractor running base recreation programs. Former college athlete. Now a youth director. Polished, confident, always around. With perfect teeth and that slick blonde hair, Troy made everyone relax. But what no one knew was that he had been forced out of his last job in Tennessee. Whispers of inappropriate relationships with military wives had followed him. Nothing proven. Everything quietly buried. Troy had a system: study the family, find the cracks, then slide into the empty space left by war. He targeted vulnerability, cloaked himself in empathy, and watched people fall apart in his hands. Amy was easy prey. Their first conversation was about Sophie, how Troy admired her spirit, how he respected Amy's dedication as a mother. It was all very professional, at first. Then came coffee. Then dinners when Sophie was at sleepovers. Compliments. Sympathy. Attention. Sophie noticed before anyone. Her mom was dressing up, smiling at her phone, checking it constantly. Amy dismissed it as making new friends, but Sophie saw through it. Children always do. 3 months into it, the affair began. Amy told herself it filled the gap Cole had left. But it was more than that. Troy gave her a fantasy, a future without war, without absence, without loneliness, a future where he was present, gentle, consistent. What she didn't see was the trap being set around her. Sophie rejected Troy from day one. She wouldn't call him dad, wouldn't even look at him. And as Troy's overnight visits became routine, Sophie grew more withdrawn. Her grades dropped. Her teacher flagged changes in behavior. Cole's last video call home had felt off. Amy had a new haircut, new jewelry. Her answers were too smooth. Sophie barely said a word. When Cole asked questions, she shrugged or gave one-word replies. He chalked it up to deployment stress, but something deep in his gut told him otherwise. 2 weeks from now, he'd be home. He was already making plans. Talks with a recruiter at Louisville Metro PD, maybe a detective job. Sophie was getting older. She'd need him around more. The timing felt right. Major Rick Valdez, Cole's CO and close friend, often said Cole was the kind of man who made the military proud. He knew what Cole had sacrificed, knew what kind of father he wanted to be. That night, Cole checked for new messages from home and felt that familiar ache. Missing bedtime stories. Missing Amy's voice. Missing Sophie's laugh. The next patrol was routine. A final sweep in a sector they'd cleared a dozen times before. In just 14 days, Cole Brennan would be back home. What he didn't know was that 2,000 miles away, his daughter was about to make a choice that would shatter everything. Sophie had finally reached her breaking point. Troy's demands had become relentless. Obedience, respect, total control. He barked orders like he owned the house. He made rules, punished Sophie when Amy wasn't home, and acted as if he was replacing her father. And Amy, she let him. Whether from fear, guilt, or denial, she stood by while the man she'd let into their lives slowly took them apart. What was coming would shake Cole Brennan's world to its core. But from that collapse, something far more dangerous would rise. Because when everything you love is threatened, and you have nothing left to lose, that's when a soldier like Cole becomes something else entirely. The call came at 3:47 a.m. Cole was half asleep, light dozing in a combat zone being the only rest you could afford. The secure satellite phone only rang for the worst news, death, critical injuries, or a family emergency that couldn't wait. His stomach dropped as he saw the number. Walter Reed National Military Medical Center. Major Valdez was already moving toward him, sensing what the call might be. Cole took the handset. His grip was steady, his voice flat. But the pressure in his jaw said everything. "This is Nurse Jennifer Morrison from Walter Reed," came the voice on the line. "Your daughter, Sophie, has been admitted to our pediatric unit." Cole's heart clenched. He kept his tone controlled, relying on 6 years of training to bury the panic threatening to surface. "What's her condition, ma'am?" "She has a concussion, 3 broken ribs, and a fractured left arm. She was injured in a fall down the stairs at your home." A pause. Then her voice softened. "Sir, Sophie asked to speak with you directly. She says it's important." The video link stabilized. The sterile glow of a hospital room appeared, and then Sophie's battered face filled the screen. Her left eye was swollen shut. A bright pink cast wrapped her small arm, cartoonish and out of place against the beeping machines around her. But it was her one good eye that gutted Cole, a silent scream of fear, pain, and raw relief. "Daddy, I'm here, baby girl." "Daddy's right here," Cole said, voice low, steady, gentle. Major Valdez stood close by, silent but watchful. He had seen Cole kill with calm precision, but now, something else was forming behind his friend's eyes. Something colder. From the screen, the nurse's voice called out softly, "Your daughter's here, sir." In the background, Cole saw Amy, distant, speaking quietly with a tall, blond man he didn't recognize. But Sophie's next words erased everything else. "Daddy, Mom's friend made me call him Dad. And when I said no, he pushed me down the stairs." Cole didn't move, but the phone shook slightly in his hand. "He said you weren't coming back," Sophie cried, "and that I had to forget about you. I told him I'd never call him Daddy. Then he got mad. He grabbed my arm, and I fell." From off-screen, the nurse's voice lowered to a whisper. "He's down the hall, with your wife." Cole didn't blink. His body stayed frozen, but something inside him flipped. The father disappeared. In his place, a threat assessor, a hunter, a man who had crossed his moral event horizon. "Sophie," he said, voice still gentle, but now with an edge that made even Valdez shift. "I need you to tell me everything. From the beginning. Can you do that for me?" She nodded slowly, tears streaking her bruised face. She told him how Troy had been staying over regularly for the past month, slowly taking over the household, making her say goodnight to him as dad, making rules about her bedtime, how she spoke, how she acted. Amy had been working late shifts at the clinic, and Troy used the time alone with Sophie to tighten his grip. Then came the day it all fell apart, 3 days ago, in front of neighbors. Troy demanded she call him father. Sophie refused. That's when he snapped. He grabbed her arm hard enough to bruise, then shoved her toward the stairs. She lost her balance, tumbled all the way down, and slammed into the tile floor. When Amy got home, Sophie was unconscious. Troy claimed she tripped while running up the stairs. EMTs accepted the story for a moment, but the bruises, the timing, the trauma, it didn't add up. Nurses had started asking questions. "Mom keeps saying I fell by myself," Sophie whispered. "But I didn't, Daddy. I promise I didn't." Cole closed his eyes. His voice was calm. Too calm. "I believe you, sweetheart. Every word." Valdez stood in silence, knowing exactly what he was witnessing. This was the same man he'd seen in Afghanistan, when they uncovered a Taliban cell using children as shields. That same cold fire was back in Cole's eyes. "Sophie," Cole said, "I need you to be brave just a little longer. I'm coming home, and when I get there, I promise you, no one will ever hurt you again. Do you understand?" She nodded, wincing at the pain. "When will you be here?" "Very soon, baby girl. You just focus on getting better. Let the doctors take care of you. And don't worry about anything else." The call ended. The screen went black. Cole sat motionless. Valdez didn't say a word, because what he saw wasn't a grieving father anymore. It was a man with a mission, and that mission was about to begin. The call ended. The screen went dark. Cole sat motionless, breathing slow and measured, but something in him was already shifting. Major Valdez didn't speak. He knew this silence. He'd seen it before, just before a mission turned surgical. It wasn't grief. It was calculation. Finally, Cole broke the stillness. His voice was flat, devoid of any heat. "I need emergency leave, sir. My daughter's been assaulted by my wife's boyfriend. She needs her father." Valdez gave a short nod. "Done. You'll be on the next bird to Ramstein, then stateside. 18 hours. Cole stood and began packing. Not with panic, not with haste. Every move was deliberate, mechanical, like prepping for deployment. But Valdez noticed something unusual. Cole wasn't just packing for comfort. He was selecting gear, tools, tactical items that didn't belong in an emergency leave duffel. "Whatever you're thinking about doing when you land," Valdez said carefully, "remember, you're still under military justice. Don't let this destroy your future." Cole looked up, meeting his eyes. "With all due respect, sir, my future was decided the moment that man laid hands on my daughter. I'm not going home to lose my temper. I'm going home to solve a problem." Valdez had heard that phrase before, from Cole, during mission briefings, when the problem was a high-value target. This wasn't anger. This was strategy. Cole pulled a small notebook from his footlocker and began writing. Dates, statements, names. Everything Sophie had told him. Valdez caught a glimpse and understood immediately. Cole wasn't reacting. He was building a case. Preparing like it was an op. "I'll need communication logs for the past 6 months," Cole said, his tone all business. "Call records. Video calls. Any digital trail that shows patterns of behavior." Valdez nodded again, silently impressed and equally concerned. This wasn't going to be a quiet return. 2 hours later, Cole boarded a transport with no ceremony, no farewell. As the rotors lifted him away from the war zone he'd called home for the past year, he stared out at the scorched Afghan earth, and something inside him turned to ice. For years, Cole had hunted enemies in deserts, jungles, and ruins to protect American families. Now, The enemy was back home. Inside his house. The flight to Germany was long, but Cole didn't waste a second. Military intel channels gave him access to background checks, contractor records, and red-flagged incidents. Piece by piece, he constructed a profile of Troy Hendris that only deepened his conviction. Troy's employment history was a trail of red flags. Short stints at youth centers and base programs. Always praised for charisma. Always leaving under vague clouds. Policy concerns. Personality conflicts. Disciplinary review. Nothing ever stuck. But the pattern was unmistakable. He infiltrated high-stress military communities. Found emotionally strained wives. Presented himself as stable, charming, available. Then manipulated his way into their homes and lives. In Tennessee, a woman named Crystal Valdez, no relation to Major Valdez, had filed a complaint. Troy had seduced her during her husband's deployment. When the husband came home early after a training injury, Troy turned possessive, threatened her, tried to pressure her into abandoning her family. She'd gone to the authorities, but by then, Troy had already vanished. Now Cole saw it clearly. Amy wasn't the first. She was just next. But this time, Troy had gone further. He had hurt a child. Not just any child, his child. And that changed everything. The skills Cole had spent 6 years honing, recon, strategy, threat elimination, they weren't for foreign battlefields anymore. They were for this. For home. As the plane crossed into European airspace, Cole sat in silence, eyes closed. But his mind was awake, locked in, running routes, weighing outcomes, strategizing. He wasn't returning as a husband, or even as a soldier. He was returning as something else, something lethal. Troy had made a mistake most predators make. He underestimated the wrong man. And Amy? Amy had betrayed the one person who would have taken a bullet for her without hesitation. They were both about to learn that some betrayals don't just break trust. They invite war. Cole Brennan was coming home. And this time, he was bringing the war with him. This was a line Troy Hendris had no business crossing. During a layover in Chicago, Cole stayed in motion. He used secure military comms to make a series of quiet but calculated calls, each one setting the stage for what was coming. First, he contacted Danny Rodriguez. Danny had been out of the military for 2 years now, working as a private investigator in Louisville. But their bond ran far deeper than friendship. Cole had carried Danny 2 miles through enemy fire after an IED blast in Helmand Province. Whatever Cole needed now, Danny was in, no questions asked. Jesus, Cole. I heard about Sophie through the base network, Danny said, voice tight with fury. How bad is it? Cole didn't sugarcoat it. He gave him a clean, clinical rundown of the injuries. Fractured arm, broken ribs, concussion, assault by a man who should have never been near his daughter. Danny's face darkened over the video feed. He had 2 daughters of his own. He understood, on a primal level, the storm Cole was walking into. What do you need from me? Danny asked. Everything on Troy Hendris, Cole replied. Financial records, phone logs, surveillance footage around my house. I want every angle, every message, every lie. I've got contacts at Louisville Metro, Danny said, already writing. They'll pull traffic cam footage, cell tower data. Give me 24 hours. I'll have a full timeline of the affair. The next call was to Frank Peterson. Frank wasn't just any lawyer. He specialized in military family law and had helped plenty of soldiers through complex divorces. He was aggressive, sharp, and known for not backing down. I've been expecting your call since I heard about Sophie, Frank said. We need custody, Cole replied. Now. Sophie's testimony gives us everything we need for an emergency protection order, Frank said. We'll get temporary custody filed before sunrise. What about Amy? Cole asked. She covered for him. Lied to the doctors. Frank paused. That's more complicated. If we can prove she knew about the abuse and didn't act, we can push for child endangerment. But it depends on whether the DA's office wants to pursue it. Then came the hardest call of all. His mother, Martha. She was in eastern Kentucky, caring for her sister, and unaware of the nightmare unfolding back home. Cole told her everything. There was silence on the line. Then her voice cracked, trembling with fury. "That bastard put his hands on Sophie?" "Yes. I always had a bad feeling about that girl," she muttered. Amy was too good at pretending. Never wanted to be a soldier's wife, just liked the idea of it. Martha had never hidden her doubts. She saw through the soft smiles and practiced charm. She'd always felt Amy was playing house, waiting for something better to come along. "I'm coming up," she said. "Sophie needs someone who puts her first. I'll be there when she wakes up." Cole's final stop before heading out was a 24-hour sporting goods store. He paid cash, used his military ID, and kept the purchases quiet. He wasn't buying comfort items. He was buying gear, surveillance cameras, long-lens optics, comms equipment, night vision, tools he'd need to see the truth clearly. Then he drove. The 90-minute stretch from Louisville to Fort Campbell passed in silence. His mind locked on the data Danny was already feeding him through encrypted channels. Troy's car had been at the house dozens of times over the last 3 months, always shortly after Amy left for work. Cell records confirmed late-night calls and hundreds of texts. But most damning of all, Amy and Troy had coordinated their stories within hours of Sophie's injury, before EMTs even arrived. The betrayal wasn't emotional anymore. It was strategic. Cole arrived at Fort Campbell just after midnight. The base looked the same, but to him, it felt hollow. The house that had once held his family, his purpose, his peace. It was a different battlefield now. A place overrun by an enemy he had trusted. He parked 3 blocks away and approached on foot, blending into the shadows with the ease of a ghost. He moved low and silent, applying every urban warfare skill he'd learned in his 6 years downrange. The house was dark, except for one lamp in the living room. Troy's BMW sat in the driveway. In Cole's driveway. That detail hit harder than expected. Another man had taken his parking spot. His bedroom. His place beside his daughter. For 2 hours, Cole observed. He documented sight lines, security weaknesses, blind spots. Troy had grown careless, confident. He made no effort to hide. No perimeter checks. No camera blocks. Just a man who believed he'd won. That arrogance would cost him. At exactly 0300, Cole made his move. He circled to the back, picked the lock in under 10 seconds, and stepped inside. The silence was suffocating. He moved through the house like a shadow. It had changed. Photos of Cole were gone, or turned face down. Sophie's school art was missing from the fridge. Her toys, once neatly stacked in her room, were scattered across the living room like clutter in someone else's space. It didn't feel like his home anymore. It felt like a crime scene. In Sophie's room, Cole found the evidence no one else had bothered to look for. Scratches on the hardwood floor, furniture dragged hastily. A small, dark bloodstain near the stairs, poorly cleaned. Sloppy. Disrespectful. Troy hadn't just hurt Sophie. He'd tried to erase the proof. Cole took photos, logged everything, then backed out the way he came, slipping into the night without a sound. From a concealed observation post, he watched the house until dawn. And as the sun crept over the rooftops, Cole wasn't the man who'd left this place behind months ago. He was the man returning to take it back, by any means necessary. At sunrise, Cole remained perched in the shadows across from the house that used to be his home. He watched with predator stillness as Troy emerged from the master bedroom and moved through the kitchen like he owned the place. The man's posture told a story, tall, built, confident. Too confident. He wasn't sneaking around anymore. He wasn't hiding. He walked with the ease of someone who believed the war had already been won. An hour later, Amy appeared. Cole studied her like she was a foreign object. Gone was the woman he had once trusted with his heart. What remained was someone jittery, fragmented, almost paranoid. She kept glancing at her phone, checking the windows. Her hands moved like she was trying to keep them busy so her thoughts wouldn't spiral. Whether she was overcome with guilt about Sophie or simply afraid of being exposed, Cole didn't care. Not anymore. When they left for the hospital together, He followed at a controlled distance. Every stop sign, every turn, every detail of their route documented. He needed to understand their rhythm, their timing, their habits. His plan demanded precision. From a high vantage point in the hospital parking garage, he watched them walk hand in hand until they reached the building entrance. Just before crossing the threshold, they let go, slipping into a pre-rehearsed performance. Amy stepped a few feet ahead. Troy stayed back. They played the part of separate acquaintances, two concerned adults coming to visit a wounded child. A careful illusion, crafted for doctors, nurses, and social workers. But Cole saw the truth. He watched the man who had brutalized his daughter stroll into the hospital with the polished smile of a concerned family friend, shaking hands, asking polite questions, using the same charm he'd used to worm his way into Amy's heart, into Cole's house, into Sophie's life. It ignited something deep in Cole's chest, something primal, not rage, purpose. He returned to his surveillance base and began finalizing preparations. There would be no confrontation today. Not yet. First, he had to dismantle every advantage his enemy believed he held. There could be no hesitation, no emotion, no room for error. The next 24 hours would demand ruthless focus and absolute execution. Troy Hendris had made a fatal mistake. He assumed a soldier away on deployment was powerless. That time and distance had weakened Cole's place in his own home. But he hadn't factored in what happens when that soldier comes back with nothing left to lose. Recon was over. Tomorrow, Cole would begin the war. But this time, he wasn't fighting for medals, for orders, or for his country. He was fighting for Sophie. And in that fight, Cole Brennan didn't lose. By dawn, Cole had relocated to a nondescript two-bedroom rental house 3 miles from base housing. Paid in cash. No IDs. No paper trail. The location had perfect sight lines of the neighborhood and multiple escape routes. The living room was converted into a full operations center within an hour. At first light, Danny Rodriguez arrived with 2 black SUVs packed with gear, surveillance kits, tactical equipment, and a manila folder thick with intelligence reports. Danny got straight to the point. Your wife emptied the joint savings account 2 weeks ago. He dropped a stack of papers on the table. $43,000, gone. Moved into a new account, joint, in both Amy and Troy's names. And they've already signed a lease on a house in Tennessee. Move-in scheduled for next month. Cole reviewed the statements, flipping through with clinical detachment. The spending pattern wasn't random, it was methodical. Controlled withdrawals. Cash transfers. This wasn't a midlife crisis. It was a full extraction plan. And Sophie? She was part of it. They had planned to disappear, to take his daughter and erase him completely. There's more, Danny added grimly, laying out a set of photographs captured with a telephoto lens. Troy's been meeting up with a woman named Patricia Mills. She works for Kentucky Child Services. Cole's eyes narrowed. Look at the timestamps, Danny continued. Every dinner, every drink, every private meeting happens within 24 hours of Amy reporting Sophie's behavioral issues to the agency. You seeing the pattern? The photos said everything. Intimate dinners. Too many smiles. Body language that made the word professional laughable. Troy hadn't just inserted himself into Amy's life. He had co-opted an ally inside child services. They've been building a custody case against me, Cole said quietly. Amy's calls. Sophie acting out after deployments. Absentee dad narrative. Teacher reports. They're setting me up to lose her. Danny nodded. Mills has a track record. 3 other cases in the past 2 years. All involved recommending removal of children from active-duty military homes where the father was deployed. She argues that military families are unstable. Cole processed it in silence. The entire picture was coming into focus. Amy's restlessness. Troy's seduction. The timing of the reports. The sudden behavioral complaints. The way Sophie's pain had been weaponized. This wasn't an affair. It was a coordinated extraction. What about local law enforcement? Cole asked. Danny shook his head. My guys at Louisville Metro are willing to help, but it happened on base. Military police are investigating the assault, but they don't know about any of this, he said, gesturing to the intel. They're focused on the incident, not the conspiracy. For the next 6 hours, Cole worked nonstop. Surveillance footage, call logs, bank statements, medical records. He mapped out Troy and Amy's daily routine, when they left, where they went, who they contacted. In public, they kept a professional distance. But in private, they operated like a couple, a unit, a family, with Cole cut out of the frame. Sophie's medical records, secured by Frank Peterson, exposed even more. Bruising patterns on her arms were consistent with adult grip marks. The angle of impact didn't match a child tripping. The ER team had flagged inconsistencies, but the case stalled. Likely influenced by Patricia Mills, whose name appeared in the report as consulted. Then came the final piece of intel that changed everything. A secure message from Major Valdez. Routine contractor background checks had triggered something unusual. Military intel had pulled up an alias flag. Troy Hendris wasn't his real name. The man Amy had let into their home was Troy Matthews, a former youth sports coach from Colorado, who had vanished after being tied to a child abuse investigation 3 years earlier. Cole read the file word for word, jaw tightening with every paragraph. Troy had been investigated for inappropriate conduct with minors. No charges, because every witness suddenly refused to testify. Anonymous threats had come to their phones, their homes. Matthews had ditched his name and resurfaced as Hendris, finding a new hunting ground. Military bases filled with vulnerable families and absent fathers. Son of a bitch's been hiding in plain sight, Cole muttered, closing the file. Now it made sense. All of it. This wasn't just personal. It was organized, intentional, predatory. And it ended now. The truth changed everything. This wasn't just an affair. This wasn't just abuse. This was premeditated, organized, and criminal. Troy Matthews, formerly Hendris, had crafted a false identity to escape prosecution in another state. Then, under that alias, he had embedded himself in military communities, targeting families weakened by deployment and stress. He'd used Amy, not just as a romantic escape, but as a strategic asset in his long con. Amy had become a willing accomplice, one who'd put her faith in a predator rather than her own husband. Cole's phone buzzed. It was the hospital. On the other end, Sophie's voice was soft, tired, but holding steady. Daddy, when are you coming to see me? Mom keeps saying you're still deployed, but I know you're here. The nurses told me you called. Cole clenched his jaw. Even from a hospital bed, Amy was still feeding their daughter lies, shielding the man who had broken her body and was trying to take her away. I'm here, sweetheart, Cole said gently. Daddy's in Kentucky, and I'm coming to see you very soon. But first, I have to make sure it's safe. I promise you, I'm almost there. There was a pause. Then Sophie whispered something that sent a chill down his spine. Troy told Mom. He said if you try to take me, they'd have to go somewhere you couldn't find us. I don't want to disappear, Daddy. I want to come home with you. The final piece locked into place. They weren't just lying. They were preparing to flee. The threats to vanish weren't empty. Troy was already laying down new roots, likely in another identity, ready to erase Cole from Sophie's life forever. Cole's voice dropped to a near whisper. Sophie, listen to me. Tomorrow, you're going to see Grandma Martha. She's coming to stay with you while Daddy handles some things. Until I say it's okay, you don't go anywhere with Mom or Troy. Do you understand? Yes, Daddy, Sophie said. Then after a beat. But what about Mom? She seems scared. Cole closed his eyes. She made some bad choices, sweetheart. Sometimes, when adults do that, other adults have to step in and fix it. But I promise you, no one is going to hurt you again. I swear it. After the call, Cole spent the next hour refining the final phase of his operation. Everything needed to be timed with surgical precision. One misstep, and Troy could disappear, again. Worse, he could take Sophie with him. Danny had already mobilized a network of former military contractors now working in private security. These weren't mall cops. These were operators, quiet professionals who owed Cole favors and respected the stakes. By midnight, Cole had complete control of the field. Every inch of Troy's schedule had been mapped. His movements, contacts, even the routes he preferred to take. The data painted a portrait of a man who had grown too comfortable, too sure of his grip on the people around him. But Cole was done playing defense. Now it was time to strike. He had three primary objectives: protect Sophie at all costs, deliver Troy into the hands of the law, with the full weight of his crimes exposed, ensure Amy faced the consequences of choosing complicity over motherhood. The plan would press the limits of legality, towing the line between tactical precision and vigilantism. But Cole no longer cared about clean hands. He had served his country with honor. He had buried friends. He had fought for families he didn't even know. Now he would fight for his own. Because Troy hadn't just hurt Sophie. He had made her afraid. And that was unforgivable. Dawn. Cold. Gray. Unforgiving. Cole dressed in dark civilian clothing. Tactical pants. Reinforced boots. Layers for movement. His kit was compact. Surveillance gear, recorders, flash drives, comms equipment. Nothing that would raise suspicion. Everything he needed for what was coming. He checked his tools one final time, every movement exact. This wasn't adrenaline. This was discipline. The same mindset he'd used clearing buildings in Fallujah. The same breathing technique from Sniper Overwatch. Only the mission had changed. At 0800 hours sharp, Martha Brennan arrived at the hospital, just as Cole had ordered. Her presence wasn't just emotional support for Sophie. She was the wedge, the legal anchor Cole needed. A witness. A respected woman in the community. A mother who had raised her son alone after being abandoned by a husband she never once let Sophie forget didn't deserve to be called family. In short, she was proof that Cole came from strength. Inside the hospital, Danny's surveillance team tracked Amy's body language the moment Martha entered the room. She's flustered, Danny reported. Keeps checking her phone, looking toward the door like she's waiting for something to go wrong. Cole wasn't surprised. She should be nervous. Troy's absence from the hospital was calculated. According to Danny's recon, he was back at Cole's house, packing. He had scheduled a flight to Tennessee for that evening, using a rental car to connect through Louisville International Airport. At 0930, Cole received the first green light. Frank Peterson had succeeded in filing emergency custody orders with family court. Citing Sophie's medical records, her testimony, and the verified abuse, the judge had not only granted Cole temporary custody, he had also signed off on a protection order against Troy Matthews under his real name. Your daughter is now legally under your protection, Frank confirmed. Troy's officially wanted for questioning on child abuse. His ID is flagged. Police are in motion. The first domino had fallen. The false identity Troy had built over the years was crumbling. But Cole wasn't finished. Now came the hard part. He needed indisputable evidence of conspiracy, proof that Amy and Troy had colluded to erase Cole from his daughter's life. It would protect Sophie from ever being forced back into that house, and it would ensure Amy faced more than just public shame. By late morning, Cole made his final approach. He crept through backyards, slipped behind fences, moved between sheds and tree lines like a ghost. Urban warfare tactics made him invisible to the average neighbor. He reached the house, his house, and dropped behind the garage. From that angle, he had full sight of the kitchen windows and the driveway. Troy's car was already loaded. Cole didn't breathe. He waited, watched, listened, because this wasn't about catching Troy by surprise. This was about making sure Troy Matthews finally understood, you don't lay hands on a soldier's child and walk away. Not this time. Not ever. Troy moved through the house with escalating urgency, his steps quick, his hands deliberate. He wasn't just packing, he was executing a pre-planned escape protocol. Every document, every bag he grabbed had a purpose. What he left behind were the things that didn't matter anymore. Decorations, souvenirs, furniture, all expendable. Cole watched it unfold through high-powered optics from his position behind the garage. Troy's behavior confirmed everything. This wasn't just relocation. It was a vanishing act, and it had been in motion long before Sophie ever hit those stairs. At 10:30 hours, Amy returned from the hospital. She looked frayed, raw, like someone unraveling by the second. Her movements were frantic, and her first words weren't greetings. They were accusations. Cole couldn't hear the audio yet, but he didn't need to. Her body language told the story, arms flailing, face taut with panic. Troy stood his ground, calm and aggressive in return, his posture hardening as she raised her voice. Cole flipped a switch on his console. Danny had wired the house with remote-activated listening devices through a private security feed. The audio came online instantly. Amy's voice crackled through the speakers. "I told you this would happen if we moved too fast. Martha showing up at the hospital means Cole knows. We should have waited until Sophie was discharged." Troy's reply was sharp and cruel. "Cole's still overseas. By the time he gets back, we'll be gone. Sophie will adjust to calling me father once she understands there's no other option." Amy's voice wavered. "She's hurt, Troy? Maybe we should." She fell down the stairs. Troy snapped, because she was being defiant. That's what happens when kids don't respect authority. "Once we're in Tennessee, she'll learn." Cole's knuckles whitened around the recording rig. Troy continued, voice low and menacing now. "You've got two choices, Amy. Come with me now, or explain to Child Services why your daughter got injured while you were screwing another man. Patricia will make sure you lose custody either way. But with me, you might still have a future." It wasn't just manipulation anymore. It was extortion. It was domination. Amy had become just another one of his hostages, cut off from her supports, bound to him by shame, fear, and false promises. She had helped create this nightmare, but now she couldn't wake up from it. Cole didn't blink, didn't speak. He just listened. And then, movement. At 11:45 hours, two new vehicles pulled into the driveway. A marked Kentucky State Police cruiser and a dark sedan. From the sedan stepped Patricia Mills, flanked by two social workers. Cole stiffened. On paper, the arrival of authorities should have been a win. But the timing was too perfect, too coordinated. And given what he now knew about Patricia's relationship with Troy, this wasn't an intervention, it was a custody grab. He tapped his comm. "They're making their move," he said calmly. "Mills is here with state backup. They're about to try and extract Sophie." Frank's voice came back instantly. "I'm en route to the hospital with federal marshals. Military family law supersedes state jurisdiction in this case, and we've submitted the proof of her conflict of interest. Sophie isn't going anywhere." Cole nodded. "Confirmed. They're out of time." He took one last breath and began to move. If anything went sideways now, there would be no room for negotiation. Troy had already shown he was willing to hurt a child. Now, cornered and exposed, he might do far worse. Cole's boots moved silently across damp grass, his body low, breathing steady. 6 years of training had built him for this moment, not just physically, but mentally. The readiness to move through chaos with clarity. The ability to recognize threats not as panic points, but as targets. Troy Matthews had built a life off exploiting the vulnerable, but he had misjudged Cole Brennan. This wasn't a vulnerable father returning from war. This was a weapon coming home. From his new cover position, Cole observed the unfolding scene on the front porch. Patricia Mills stood at the center, clipboard in hand, explaining something to the two state troopers. Her voice was low but confident, coated in professional concern. Troy stood beside her, adopting the mask of a caring father figure, polished, calm, rehearsed. Amy stood just to the right, arms crossed, face pale. She looked like someone trying to disappear into the siding of the house. Cole flipped on the directional mic. "Mr. Hendris has been acting as a father figure during the service member's deployment," Mills was saying. "Given the child's recent instability and injury, we believe temporary placement with him is in her best interest." Troy nodded, slipping easily into the role of protector. "Sophie's had a difficult time coping with abandonment. Amy and I have provided structure. Stability. Cole nearly laughed, quietly, bitterly. The lies never ended. He could feel his pulse pounding, but he forced it back down. Emotion had no place here. This was still strategy, still chess, and he hadn't moved his queen yet. The officers exchanged glances. Uncertain, hesitant, not quite convinced, but not fully informed either. Amy said nothing. She didn't defend Troy, but she didn't stop him either. She just stood there, watching the war play out around her, paralyzed by the wreckage she helped create. Cole exhaled once, slowly, and touched the comm in his ear. "Frank, you in place." "Roger that," came the reply. "We're in Sophie's room. The marshals are serving the custody orders now." "Perfect. Let's end this." He stepped from the shadows, eyes locked on the people who had torn his world apart. He wasn't running anymore. He wasn't hiding. This was his home, his daughter. And no one, not Troy Matthews, not Patricia Mills, not even Amy Brennan, was going to steal that from him again. Troy Matthews had always been a master of performance, projecting authority, warmth, even sincerity. But Cole saw right through it. The man was a predator in a tailored shirt. And now, finally, his carefully built stage was starting to collapse. Sergeant Williams, the ranking officer on scene, shifted uncomfortably as he studied the dueling paperwork. Emergency custody orders signed by a federal judge in one hand, and Patricia Mills' recommendations under state jurisdiction in the other. "Ma'am," he said cautiously, "we've got conflicting documentation here. Federal says the child stays where she is, but you're claiming state authority applies." Patricia didn't blink. She stepped forward with calm defiance, clearly used to getting her way. "The federal order was based on incomplete information," she said, "filed by an absentee father with no first-hand knowledge of the child's day-to-day condition. Military status doesn't override child welfare." That was the moment Cole decided he'd heard enough. He tapped his comm once. "Initiate Phase 3, he said softly. "I'm going in." Back at the mobile ops hub, Danny triggered a digital release. Within moments, detailed intelligence packets, containing Troy's real identity, his criminal history, and his communications with Mills, were on their way to state police internal affairs, federal child welfare units, and military CID. While the system moved, so did Cole. He stepped out from his concealed position and walked toward the house. Not rushing, not posturing, just arriving. Calm, composed, deadly. The police noticed him first, hands instinctively shifting toward their weapons, until they saw the posture. The bearing. The cold focus of someone who had walked into war zones and come back alive. Cole raised his ID. "Afternoon, officers," he said with quiet control. "Staff Sergeant Cole Brennan. On emergency leave from Kandahar. I believe you're here about my daughter." The effect was immediate. Troy's spine stiffened. His face twitched, first disbelief, then panic. Amy gasped, the blood draining from her face. This wasn't how she thought it would happen. Not like this. Patricia Mills stepped forward fast, trying to salvage the crumbling narrative. "Sergeant Brennan, we were just discussing a temporary care plan for Sophie while you transitioned back to civilian. Mr. Hendris," Cole said, cutting her off, whose real name is Troy Matthews, is under investigation for child abuse. Federal authorities have also opened a case for identity fraud and conspiracy to commit kidnapping. Silence cracked across the yard like a gunshot. Sergeant Williams straightened. His hand dropped visibly to rest on his weapon. The other officers fanned out instinctively, controlling the perimeter, eyes now trained on Troy with growing suspicion. Patricia flinched. That's not possible. We vetted. He's been living under a false identity since fleeing child abuse allegations in Colorado." Cole continued, voice low but sharp. "We have photos, financial records, and direct audio of his coercion." Then Troy cracked. "You think you can just show up and destroy what we built?" he snapped. The polished, calm persona was gone, replaced by something feral. "Amy chose me, soldier boy. Your daughter needed discipline. You poisoned her mind against me." Cole didn't flinch. "My daughter is 8, he said flatly. And the only thing she needed to learn was that no one gets to hurt her and pretend it's love. Amy finally found her voice, though it trembled. She stepped forward, mascara streaking down her face. Cole, you don't understand. It wasn't supposed to happen like this. She fell. I swear. She told me what happened, Cole said, voice hardening. In detail. On video. She said he forced her to call him dad. And when she refused, he grabbed her, shoved her down the stairs. Would you like to hear the recording? The words detonated through the scene. Troy's face turned the color of rusted metal. His composure melted into rage. That little liar, he spat. She's been trouble from the start. Disrespecting me. Undermining me. She had to learn. It was over. He had just confessed, in front of law enforcement, while being recorded, to deliberately harming a child as punishment. Sergeant Williams stepped forward without hesitation. Sir, place your hands behind your back. You're under arrest for suspected child abuse. Troy didn't comply. He lunged. In one sharp move, he grabbed Amy's wrist and yanked her toward him like a shield. Back off, he shouted. Amy comes with me, or I'll make sure the whole world knows what kind of mother she is. Leaving her kid to shack up with someone who actually gave a damn. Cole was already moving. No hesitation. No emotion. Just motion, fluid and precise. 3 steps. Left pivot. Elbow strike to the wrist. Troy's grip broke with a cry. Amy stumbled back, freed. Cole stepped between them, body low, hands steady. Touch her again, he said, voice calm as a tomb. And I'll show you exactly what we learned clearing houses in Helmand Province. Troy staggered, but Cole's presence kept him frozen. He wasn't just facing a husband. He was facing a soldier trained to end threats with finality. The cops pulled them apart seconds later, but the damage was done. And then, in one last desperate gasp, Troy twisted to Amy, spitting venom. You think he'll forgive you? He snarled. You think he'll take you back? After what we did in his bed every night, he's going to throw you away like garbage. Amy broke. The last of her defenses shattered. Her sobs weren't for Troy. They weren't even for Cole. They were for herself, for the wreckage she'd allowed to bloom inside her life. It wasn't just betrayal anymore. It was scorched earth. Troy's last words weren't weapons. They were nails in his own coffin. Proof that he'd never loved Amy, never wanted Sophie, never planned anything except conquest and domination. And now, with the whole facade burned away, Cole turned and looked at the woman who had once been his partner. Not with anger, not even hate, just calculation, like a soldier assessing collateral damage and deciding what could still be saved. The woman Cole had once built a life with, shared dreams, pain, and a daughter, sat across from him now as someone he no longer recognized. Amy looked hollow. The defiance that had once fueled her betrayal had collapsed into a posture of regret and exhaustion. But regret wasn't the same as redemption. Not now. Not after everything. Cole listened in silence as Amy unraveled her part in the story, sitting on the same park bench where they'd once watched Sophie chase butterflies. The irony was thick. The place meant for laughter was now a confessional for everything broken between them. I never wanted this, Amy said, her voice cracking. I didn't know how far it had gone. I swear. Cole, I didn't know he would hurt her like that. He didn't speak. He just looked at her, like a surgeon studying a wound that had gone septic. Not with hate, not even anger, just cold clarity. Amy went on. At first, he just listened. I needed that. You were gone so much. And when you were here, you were always in mission mode. Always tactical. Like I was just another part of the routine. He made me feel seen again. Cole finally responded, voice low. You needed to feel seen. So you gave my daughter to a predator. She flinched, but didn't deny it. Troy didn't just isolate me, she said quietly. He controlled everything. He read my messages. He coached me on what to say to child services, to the doctors. He said Sophie needed structure, that if she kept misbehaving, we'd lose her. Her voice broke at that last word, and for a moment, She looked like someone who had finally glimpsed the enormity of the damage she had helped cause. Cole leaned forward slightly, eyes sharp. You lied to the hospital. You lied to Sophie. You stood there while he convinced her she had to forget me. And you did it all so you wouldn't be alone. Amy's tears returned. I didn't know how to get out. I didn't know how to fight him. By the time I realized how dangerous he was, I thought it was too late. You had every chance, Cole said. You chose him anyway. And Sophie paid the price. They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Amy said, Do you hate me? Cole looked away toward the playground, where rusted swings creaked in the wind. I don't hate you, he said slowly. I don't even have the luxury of that. Hate would mean I still feel something strong enough to care. But whatever was between us died the second you let him touch our daughter. Amy nodded. She didn't argue. She didn't beg. Maybe she finally understood. I'm going to sign away parental custody, she said. Full custody. No visitation. I already talked to Frank. I know it's not enough, but it's what I can do now. Cole said nothing. He didn't thank her. He didn't reassure her. Some wounds weren't meant to heal with gestures. She stood up, wiped her face, and looked at him one last time. Tell Sophie I love her. If she'll ever believe it. He didn't answer. She walked away. Cole remained on the bench, staring into the empty park. The wind whispered through the trees like voices from the past. He remembered bringing Sophie here when she was 4, how she had clung to the monkey bars and shouted, Look, Daddy, I'm strong like you. That was the thing about betrayal. It wasn't always loud. Sometimes, it was just someone choosing not to protect what mattered most. The legal machine continued to move. With federal charges stacked high, Troy Matthews wasn't going anywhere. The DA, bolstered by evidence and the testimonies of multiple families, rejected all plea offers. No deals. No mercy. Troy's crimes now included child endangerment, identity fraud, conspiracy to commit kidnapping, obstruction of justice, sexual misconduct. Investigations reopened from 3 different states. His lawyer, a pale man with shaking hands, withdrew from the case after receiving death threats from a local veterans group. Troy's new representation came court-appointed. Cole never bothered to attend the arraignment. Frank kept him informed. He's looking at life, Cole. If not through one charge, then through the stack of them. Even if he makes it to trial, he's going away for good. But Cole didn't relax. He didn't celebrate. Because he knew men like Troy, men who saw systems as soft, who saw prison as just another phase. Cole spent the weeks that followed rebuilding not his marriage, not his name, but his daughter's trust. He moved to a private residence outside Fort Campbell, a quiet farmhouse guarded by private security and reinforced locks. Sophie returned home under the protective eyes of Martha and a team of trauma therapists coordinated through Frank's network. At first, Sophie didn't talk much. She clung to Martha. She slept with a flashlight under her pillow. But when Cole tucked her in on her 3rd night back and kissed her forehead, she whispered, You came for me. I always will, Cole said. Weeks passed. Troy Matthews was formally indicted on federal charges and held without bail. Patricia Mills was disbarred and arrested on charges of obstruction and conspiracy. Her attempt to pin the blame on Troy failed under cross-examination when wire transfers and surveillance footage implicated her directly. Amy signed the custody papers without protest. And finally, quietly, Cole Brennan submitted his discharge papers. After 6 years of service, he walked away from the military with no fanfare, no final salute. Because now his battlefield had a new name, fatherhood. And for the first time in years, he knew exactly what he was fighting for. The air in the command center was thick with tension. Maps lined the walls. Surveillance footage cycled across multiple monitors. Names, photos, and digital dossiers were pinned to corkboards and whiteboards, strings of red yarn linking them like a criminal family tree. This wasn't just about one man anymore. Troy Matthews had peeled back the curtain on something bigger, something systemic. And now Cole Brennan was part of a federal task force whose sole objective was to dismantle it permanently. Special Agent Maria Santos didn't waste time with pleasantries. Troy Matthews is part of an active network, she began, pointing to the pinned mugshots on the wall. They recruit ex-cons, identity thieves, and social workers with vulnerabilities. Then they target military communities, places where fathers are deployed, mothers are under strain, and oversight is thin. Cole stood off to the side, arms crossed, absorbing every detail. We've confirmed links between Matthews and two similar cases in California and Texas. In both cases, military wives entered relationships under emotional manipulation. When the husbands returned, the children had been moved, injured, or completely removed from the home. And the local systems let it happen? Cole asked, voice low and sharp. They exploited loopholes, Santos replied. Used insider contacts in child services to delay investigations. Built false narratives of unstable home environments. Painted the fathers as dangerous or absentee. When the fathers pushed back, the mothers claimed domestic abuse. It was a playbook. Cole's jaw tightened. He could feel it again, that coil inside his chest pulling tighter. Troy's a key node, Santos said. But there are others. We're working with military CID and U.S. Marshals to roll up every known associate. This is going to move fast. And hard. Danny Rodriguez entered the room with new intel, setting down a folder thick with surveillance images and intercepted comms. Two of Troy's guys were casing Martha's house this morning. Out-of-state rental car with stolen tags. They peeled off when we tailed them, but they were armed. This isn't over. Cole flipped through the photos. The men looked ordinary. Bland. The kind of faces you'd forget in a crowd. That made them dangerous. What's the protocol if they try something again? Cole asked. Containment, Santos said. You let the marshals handle it. Cole didn't answer, because he wasn't planning on letting anyone else handle it. Back at the hospital, Cole visited Sophie's room. Martha sat in the corner chair, crocheting silently, eyes flicking toward every noise in the hallway. The instinct of a grandmother who had already survived one ambush and wasn't about to allow a second. Sophie looked better, bruises fading, cast covered in stickers, but her eyes still held that heaviness. The kind of weight a child shouldn't carry. Daddy, she said softly. He knelt beside her bed. I'm here, baby. Everything's okay now. She nodded slowly, then whispered, Are the bad guys gone? He paused, then said the most honest thing he could. Not yet. But they will be. That night, Cole sat in a borrowed truck across from a rural motel outside Fort Campbell. Danny had traced the burner phone Troy used from jail. Calls had been made to this exact location within minutes of his bail being posted. Two men were inside. Former enforcers tied to a trafficking ring that used similar grooming tactics on runaway teens. They weren't here for vacation. Cole watched as one of them stepped outside for a cigarette. The man scanned the area with casual ease, too casual. It was the move of someone trained to blend, to avoid suspicion. Cole got out of the truck. In less than 10 seconds, he was behind the man. Nice night, Cole said. The man turned, hand drifting toward his waistband, too slow. Cole pinned him against the wall, one arm twisted behind his back. You were planning to take a child. Wrong town. Wrong girl. The man struggled. Cole applied pressure to the shoulder joint, just enough to hint at the consequences. I've got federal agents watching this place, Cole said. You're already under surveillance. But me? I'm not law enforcement anymore. So if you even look at my daughter, I won't arrest you. I'll make you disappear in a hole so deep the rats will get lost. The man froze. You understand me? Cole asked. The enforcer nodded. Cole let him go, stepping back. Pack your things. You've got 10 minutes to vanish. The man scrambled inside, and Cole stood there, staring at the door, letting the message burn in. He didn't want blood. He didn't want vengeance. But he would unleash hell if anyone came for his daughter again. By the end of the week, the task force had taken down 5 more network members. Warrants were issued. Corruption charges were filed. Patricia Mills struck a deal, trading testimony for protection, but even her story couldn't save her from disbarment and a future far from child services. Troy Matthews sat in solitary confinement awaiting federal trial. No bail. No allies left. and Cole made sure to submit one final document, an official victim impact statement. It wasn't long, but it was clear. If Troy Matthews ever sees the outside of a cell, I will be waiting. I will protect my daughter with every breath I have left. The law may grant him rights, but nature does not. Let that be known. And so, the war shifted. Not to peace, but to vigilance. Sophie returned to school with a private security detail that no one noticed but Cole. Amy's parental rights were suspended indefinitely. Martha moved in with Cole to help with the transition. Danny kept tabs on former associates of the ring, just in case. And Cole, he built a new life. Quiet, focused, not trying to erase the past, but to forge something stronger from its wreckage. Because he knew now, justice wasn't a courtroom verdict. It was a father never failing again. Cole looked into his daughter's eyes, wide, tired, shadowed by too much truth for someone her age, and something final settled in his bones. This wasn't about containment anymore, not about custody battles or courtrooms. This was war, and the enemy had just crossed another line. He leaned in, brushing a strand of hair from Sophie's forehead. That man can't hurt you anymore. I'm here, and nothing, not anyone, gets past me now. Sophie nodded slowly, still too young to fully understand the layers of protection forming around her, but old enough to recognize certainty when she heard it. Outside her hospital room, Cole reconvened with Martha. Her stance was steady, her eyes sharp. "You're going to kill him, aren't you?" she asked plainly. Cole didn't answer. He didn't need to. Back in the Task Force Command Center, Agent Santos was reviewing intercepted communications from burner phones connected to the network. Her team had picked up chatter about package extraction and dead zone protocols, phrases that suggested more than just a rogue contractor slipping his leash. This was organized, sophisticated, and clearly capable of adapting under pressure. Danny Rodriguez joined her at the map board. "We found a secondary location, an abandoned transport hub 15 miles outside Fort Campbell. The same shell corporation that posted Troy's bail is on the lease. It's rigged with surveillance blind spots and reinforced exits. If they're planning an extraction, that's the place." Santos looked to the corner of the room, where Cole had returned without ceremony, arms crossed, scanning the data. "This can't be a raid," she said. "Not yet. We need full warrants, multi-jurisdictional cooperation." "We don't have time," Cole replied. "They're planning to take her. They've already tried twice in 2 days. You want an airtight prosecution. I want a living daughter." Danny didn't argue. He knew Cole's tone, knew what it meant when the soldier started using operational verbs instead of legal terms. "I can be ready in an hour," Danny said. "I've got X teams on standby. Quiet, clean, no loose ends." Santos looked between them. "You understand this goes beyond your daughter. This is federal now. If you act outside the operation, I'm not acting outside anything," Cole said. "I'm acting ahead of it." 3 hours later, under cover of dusk, Cole, Danny, and a 3-man team of former Tier 1 operators moved through the overgrown perimeter of the transport hub. The building was dark, windows blacked out, no visible security, but Cole knew better than to trust appearances. Danny signaled infrared. Thermal scans showed 4 heat signatures, 2 standing, 1 seated, 1 pacing. They were expecting someone. The team fanned out, silent, swift, systematic. Cole entered through the rear, using a key code Danny's tech had hacked from a compromised cloud database. Inside, it smelled of dust, oil, and cheap cologne. The kind of place built for one purpose: vanish. The first target went down quietly, just a sharp blow to the throat and a plastic tie around the wrists. The second one tried to draw a weapon and got a concussion grenade in the face for the effort. Cole reached the inner office where a laptop glowed faintly, and Troy Matthews sat waiting, hands folded, smiling like a man who still thought he had the upper hand. "You're early," Troy said, tone smug. "I was expecting feds, not you." Cole stepped into the room, closing the door behind him. "I'm not the feds," he said. "No, you're the grieving father. The honorable soldier. always playing by the rules. I was, Cole replied. Then I met you. Troy leaned back, calculating. You don't have proof of anything. Not enough to make it stick. Cole reached into his vest, pulled out a USB drive, and placed it on the table. That's a full data dump. Surveillance, bank records, comm logs. Your network's exposed. Every transaction, every handler, every child you used to manipulate leverage over military families. It's over. Troy's smile faltered. Cole stepped closer. You're not going to prison, Matthews, he said calmly. You're going to disappear. Completely. This time, no alias. No next target. You think you can just erase me? Troy hissed. I'm not erasing you, Cole said. I'm finishing you. With a sharp motion, he turned, opened the door, and Santos was standing outside, flanked by federal marshals. You recorded that? Cole asked her. All of it, she said. Good. Troy surged forward in a final act of desperation, but was met by two marshals and the barrel of a Sig Sauer between his eyes. Try it, one said. Matthews was taken into custody without another word. 2 days later, Cole stood outside Sophie's school, arms folded, watching her run across the playground. Free. Safe. Smiling like the child she was supposed to be. Amy's parental rights had been formally terminated. Patricia Mills was awaiting trial on conspiracy and federal obstruction charges. And Troy Matthews had been moved to a maximum security black site where the full weight of the system and the people he'd hurt could finally bear down. Cole's war was over, but his mission wasn't. He joined Santos in a quiet debriefing room where she laid down a thick folder titled Operation Dead Zone. There are more out there, she said. We'll need someone who understands the playbook. Someone with experience. Cole looked down at the folder, then back toward the window where his daughter played. He nodded once. I'm in. Sophie had lived through more in 8 years than some survived in a lifetime. Forced to weigh her father's safety against her own, she'd carried the burden of impossible choices, planted there by a man with no soul and no limits. It was a cruelty no child should bear, and it spoke volumes about Troy's complete absence of moral restraint. Sophie, look at Daddy, Cole said, kneeling to her level, locking his eyes to hers. Troy lied. He lied about me not coming home. He lied about having power over you. And he lied when he said he could hurt me. She nodded, hesitant but understanding. Still, Cole could see it. The damage. The fear that had seeped deep, like poison. Troy hadn't just hurt her body. He had tried to own her mind. And healing from that would take more than just time. It would take protection she could feel in her bones. Before Cole could say more, Danny's voice cut through the earpiece like a blade. Multiple vehicles. Converging fast. Parking garage level 3. Armed. Confirmed. This is not a drill. Every part of Cole shifted into combat mode. Breathing slowed. Movements narrowed to purpose. The hunt was on, and now the hunters were walking into the wrong damn trap. Martha, he said, snapping into command. Take Sophie into the bathroom and lock the door. Don't come out until I say. No matter what you hear. She didn't question it. She scooped up Sophie and disappeared into the back, locking the door behind them with a soft click. Cole moved to the entrance of the hospital room, weapon drawn, body low, eyes on the corridor. The hallway was a kill funnel. Tight. Predictable. If they came, they'd be forced to expose themselves one by one. And that would be enough. 6 years overseas had taught him many things. How to assess threats. How to neutralize them. How to protect the vulnerable, even when outnumbered. But most of all, how to fight without hesitation when the stakes left no room for failure. This time, the battlefield wasn't a village in Afghanistan or a compound in Syria. It was a hospital in Kentucky. And this time, the mission was personal. This time, it was his daughter. The first movement came at 1347. Simultaneous breaches from stairwells and elevators. 6 men in coordinated black gear. Their formation was surgical, their timing tight. This wasn't a ragtag crew of mercenaries. These were trained operators, military, ex-law enforcement, maybe even federal. Their goal was clear, eliminate resistance, extract the girl, vanish before the response team caught up. They didn't expect what was waiting behind room 416. From his position inside, Cole watched them advance via a hacked feed Danny had patched through the hospital's camera system. He saw weapons, compact SMGs, suppressed pistols. He saw gas canisters in one man's bag, non-lethal agents designed to incapacitate without leaving forensic evidence. And he saw confidence, arrogance. These men were used to winning. Federal marshals are down, Danny reported. Chemical dispersal confirmed. Hospital requesting evacuation of pediatric wing. They were planning to erase the entire scene under the fog of confusion and red tape. But they'd miscalculated. They weren't raiding an undefended facility. They were walking into a war zone defended by a ghost. The first man reached the door at 1349. He moved clean, quiet, rifle up, eyes scanning, until he wasn't. Cole hit him with surgical precision. One shot center mass, one to the thigh to disable, then disarmed and dragged aside before his team noticed he was down. The next two entered seconds later. Cole used the angle of the corridor to box them in, taking advantage of their momentum to turn it into chaos. One hit the floor screaming, the other slammed into the far wall after a short, brutal takedown. This wasn't about revenge. It was about finality. Every movement Cole made had one purpose: neutralize the threat to his daughter with absolute certainty. The fourth attacker tried to flank. Cole caught him at the hip with a round that dropped him instantly. The fifth was smarter. He hesitated, fell back, radioed in. Cole moved forward during the moment of indecision, seized initiative, and finished the fight. By the time Agent Santos and her tactical unit arrived, Cole stood alone in a hallway littered with incapacitated operatives and blood-streaked gear. The marshals were recovering. No civilians had been harmed. Every hostile had been neutralized. Jesus Christ, Santos muttered as she surveyed the aftermath. 1 man against 6. That's not security. That's war fighting. Cole checked the final attacker, zip-tying wrists behind the man's back, voice calm, steady. They came for my daughter. I responded accordingly. The gravity of what had just occurred began to take shape as agents swept through the facility. What they found on the bodies and equipment confirmed everything. Encrypted drives, hard cash, burner phones, operational notes targeting not just Sophie, but dozens of children from other military families. Maps, names, schedules. It wasn't a kidnapping cell. It was a nationwide network. The attackers weren't just taking children. They were flipping entire custody battles through fear, fraud, and force, all under the guise of helping struggling families while their fathers were deployed. And Troy Matthews? They found him in a van parked 3 blocks away, alone, surrounded by surveillance gear, listening, coordinating, waiting for Cole to fail. He didn't get the ending he was expecting. Troy had coordinated the assault from a surveillance van parked 3 blocks away, using encrypted comms to direct the operation while keeping his own hands clean. But that distance wouldn't save him. When federal agents pulled him from the vehicle, they also seized hard drives that cracked open the leadership hierarchy of the entire criminal network. With Troy in custody and his devices decrypted, the full scope came into brutal focus. What had seemed like a domestic betrayal turned out to be a national operation, years in the making, designed to exploit military families through fraud, coercion, and psychological warfare. The families served their country. Troy's syndicate served itself. This is bigger than any of us expected, Agent Santos told Cole during the final debrief. Systemic corruption, organized financial crime, child exploitation. Your response exposed a network that was hurting hundreds. You didn't just protect your daughter. You protected families across the country. Cole nodded, but his focus was elsewhere. Sophie. Healing. Stability. Her world had been upended by deceit and violence. Her safety now secured, the real work began, rebuilding what had been broken. Amy's legal case was complicated. Though complicit, she was also manipulated. In the end, The court sentenced her to probation with strict supervision and limited, court-monitored visitation with Sophie. She would live with her choices forever, and so would Cole. 3 weeks after the hospital assault, the custody hearing was a formality. The judge granted Cole full legal and physical custody of Sophie. Martha's continued support sealed the decision. Family first, no compromises. 6 months later, Cole transitioned into civilian life as planned, joining Louisville Metro PD as a detective assigned to crimes against children. With his background and insight into predatory behavior, he became the kind of cop he wished his family had before the nightmare began. Danny Rodriguez stayed close. Partner, uncle, brother-in-arms. Together, they launched a private security firm protecting vulnerable military families from the same exploitation they had survived. Sophie's recovery was steady. Therapy, structure, and love did what they were meant to do. The bruises faded. The nightmares softened. What remained was trust, rebuilt through Cole's presence and absolute commitment to her safety. Amy tried more than once to reconnect, but Cole's position never shifted. Betrayal that endangers a child draws a permanent line. Trust, once shattered at that level, didn't get patched with apologies. Actions had consequences. Choices had weight. And Amy had chosen wrong. Troy Matthews. He was sentenced to 45 years in federal prison without parole. His assets were seized. His network dismantled. Patricia Mills lost her credentials, her freedom, and her reputation, sentenced to 10 years for her role in the conspiracy. The Child Services Agency where she worked was gutted and rebuilt from the ground up, now under federal oversight. It wouldn't happen again. 1 year later, the world looked different. Cole sat on his porch, watching Sophie play in the front yard under Martha's watchful eye. Her laughter, free, innocent, floated across the warm Kentucky air. It was a sound Cole hadn't heard in far too long. Danny joined him on the steps, sipping coffee, eyes on the child they both had fought to protect. "Any regrets?" he asked quietly. Cole thought for a long moment. "I regret not seeing it sooner. I regret what Sophie had to go through. But do I regret anything I did to stop it?" He shook his head. Not for a second. Before Danny could respond, Sophie came bounding up the steps, beaming. She climbed into Cole's lap like it was her throne. "Grandma says you're a hero," she said, proud. "She says you saved me from the bad men." "Is that true?" Cole wrapped his arms around her, holding her like she might disappear. "Sweetheart," he said, steady and sure. "Daddy did what any father would do. I protected the most important thing in my life." Sophie nestled into his chest, safe. That moment, that quiet, perfect moment, was the victory. It didn't come with medals or ceremonies. It came in a child's laughter, in trust restored, in a future reclaimed. Cole had fought wars in deserts and cities across the globe. But the most brutal war he ever waged was here, at home. Against a predator who infiltrated his house, corrupted his marriage, and tried to steal his daughter. And he won, not just through firepower, but through unwavering clarity, through love, through refusal to let evil go unpunished. Troy had underestimated what it meant to cross a soldier trained to eliminate threats, especially when that soldier became a father with nothing left to lose. That war was over. Justice had been served. Permanently. This is where the story ends. If it gripped you, if it moved you, subscribe to the channel and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Click the video on your screen now for more stories like this, and thank you for watching.